Many of you probably don't know that my last name, as odd as it is the name of a city and a province in the Netherlands. Actually, Utrecht, as they might say, and I don't say it very well, is the fourth largest city in the Netherlands, known for its emphasis on cycling and art supplies, and being the location for the signing of major treaties throughout world history, including one that ended the War of Spanish Succession in 1713. Aren't you impressed? You are privileged to know me. I am quite famous, and I guess I'm Dutch. Now, I have to admit my family never considered itself Dutch, even though some of the folks in the city of Holland here almost get giddy when they hear what my name is. I'm a part of the club. We've always said that back in Cincinnati, we always said that we were German, although I suspect that my family had its origins in the Netherlands. And the only time I ever heard my dad use the word Dutch was when he would say, "That guy is a stubborn old Dutchman." But for him, I got to tell you, the Dutchman wasn't a Dutch person, but was a German. I don't know why, but I'm just reporting the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Truthfully, I've had very little contact with people of Dutch descent until I moved here. And around here, there are lots of them. The Dusseljays and the Rinsemas and the Siebengas and the Portingas and the Van Fossens and the Van Hoosens. Everywhere you go, there are people who come from the Holy Land of the Netherlands. Now, at one point in my time here, I was introduced to a phrase that, frankly, I had never heard till I moved here. And that phrase was, "If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much." Now, frankly, some people would say such a thing with a slight smirk on their face, and I would highlight slight smirks because Dutch people tend not to want to get too worked up just about anything. Honestly, I think they were kidding when they said that, I think they were kidding. But I suspect that those words had some rootedness in a worldview that had an impact on their community's perspectives and lives. And I couldn't help but think of that line when I was struggling with the Reformation text for today. Admittedly, I have grown weary of the Reformation text. We get the same ones every year. And when you've preached for 30-some years, well, you've pretty well plumbed the depths of all of those texts. But a fresh reading of the Romans and John texts and some new and faithful biblical scholarship that I have recently been exposed to have gotten me thinking in some new ways about the insights of Paul and John today, insights that have me wondering about the role of ethnic or cultural identity. A primary issue for the early church, one highlighted by Paul, was what to do with folks who were not shaped by Jewish identity and practice. What to do with the so-called Gentiles, the non-Jews. Now, the Jesus movement had its origins in Jewish thought and practice. You got to get this, Jesus was not a Christian. You got to get over that. Jesus was a Jew, and the Jesus movement had its origins in Jewish thought, practice, and culture. Well, as the message was spread, the message of the news of Jesus was spread, largely due to Paul's great work, the early church, primarily a group of Reformed Jews, had to think through the significance of Jewish heritage and practice for a Christian community that was populated less and less by ethnic Jews. The Torah, the law, central to Jewish identity, wasn't a part of most Gentiles' experience. Most of them didn't know about or care about the importance of circumcision or kosher food laws. So what do we do with those folks who weren't exposed to all of that? Do we insist that the Gentiles get circumcised and not eat pork rinds or ham sandwiches? Do you make Gentiles become Jewish before they can become Christian? How significant will ethnic or cultural identity be for the Christian movement? Well, Paul had a definite perspective on that, a perspective that is worked out in the reading from Romans today. Listen to what he says. Now, we know that whatever the law speaks, it speaks to those who are under the law. Oh, and guess who that is? Those under the law are Jews. The law resonates with Jews. They get it. And Paul goes on to say it speaks to them in a way that silences them, or as Don's version said today, shuts their mouths, that prevents them from getting too haughty. Jews have no reason to brag, is the point. After all, Paul says, through the law, and this is his view of the law, comes the knowledge of sin. Through the law, you realize that you've messed up. The Jews' mouths are silenced then, just as the Gentiles' mouths have been silenced all along. But their mouths being silenced or shut up are not because of the law. Life itself, Paul says, reveals their messed upness. All people, both Jews and Gentiles, Paul says, are under the power of sin. In verses outside of our text today, Paul says, there's no one who is righteous. No one who is righteous. Not even one. So, when thinking about whether the Gentiles are welcome or not, Paul says it loudly and clearly. Everybody's messed up. Everybody. It is a universal phenomenon. And your little ethnic or cultural or religious identity is not going to protect you from that truth. If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. Really? If you ain't German, or if you ain't Catholic, or if you ain't Lutheran, or you aren't the right kind of Lutheran, you ain't much. Really? If you ain't Republican, or if you ain't Democrat, you ain't much. Really? For heaven's sake, and I say that purposefully, get over that kind of stuff. Life defined simply by labels or ethnic or cultural identity can be a shallow life. Now, don't get me wrong here. Don't get me wrong at all. I don't want you to misunderstand me. Those labels, those experiences, those identities are really quite fascinating. I love them. They make your story a lot more interesting. And I suspect that if you read Paul fully, you will discover that he wasn't opposed to Jewish practices and Jewish cultural expressions. He didn't want to do away with the law, and people said that he was doing away with the law. He says, God forbid, I didn't mean to. That's not what I'm saying. He didn't think that the baby should be thrown out with the bathwater, which is what Paula pointed out in her children's sermon today. He just wanted us to be careful that our identities and our practices don't get in the way of our connecting to new people whose experiences and histories may look very different from our own. Our cultural, religious, ethnic identities sometimes can get in the way of our love. Get in the way of our building a life-filled, new, reformed future together. And I suspect that is what Jesus is addressing in John today. To some Judeans, John says, who had in the past believed in him, Jesus says, if you remain in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And they respond by saying, free? I mean, we have the right ethnic identity. We are descendants of Abraham. We've never been slaves to anyone. What's this about freedom? Descendants of Abraham. We've got the right pedigree. We're from the right group of folks. We've got the right culture and religious identity. We do the right things. Free? Heck, we've always been free. This is the kind of thing Americans say, by the way. We're Americans. We're Americans. Why are you critiquing us? What do we need to be set free from? Freedom is the mark of our identity. As we say such things, we sound a lot like the Judeans in John. First of all, forgetting our history. The Judeans are obviously forgetting. They said they've never been enslaved to anyone. Oh, can we tell you the story of your own people? Can we talk about enslavement in Egypt and in Babylon and Assyria? And they also are forgetting the deeper truth that Jesus points to, and that is that all of us, we're all enslaved to sin. Let's face it, sometimes our sense of freedom in this culture, and it's a major issue at this time, sometimes our sense of freedom in this culture can just be another form of slavery. When we yell out, "We're Americans, free to do whatever we want," we fail to grasp that such freedom is just enslavement, sometimes to ourselves and our selfish preoccupations. Being an American or being a descendant of Abraham is not a recipe for the avoidance of sin. In fact, those identities may just give us more tools for our enslavement. We're all messed up. We're all messed up. We're all slaves to sin. Our pedigrees, our cultural, religious identities will not eliminate our enslavement. La-dee-da, I'm grateful. I really am glad that you're Dutch or Norwegian or German or Republican or Democrat or Lutheran, the right kind of Lutheran or not Lutheran. I'm really glad you're that. But you got to hear this. You got the same problems as everybody else. But then hear this. Not only do you have the same problems as everybody else, you are the recipients of the generous love and grace of God, love and grace that welcome both Jews and Gentiles. Our confidence then as human beings is not based on our being better than others, having the right cultural or ethnic identity, or doing things the right way, but comes, as Cynthia Kittredge says, from God's mission of worldwide rescue that leaves nobody out. We're all messed up, but we all are phenomenally loved. We're all a part of God's mission to bring the whole world together. But now, Paul says, I love that line, but now, apart from the law, apart from that which is integral to Jewish identity, the righteousness of God has been disclosed. The righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. There is no distinction. Since all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, they are also all justified by God's grace as a gift we experience in Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Your labels, they're interesting, they really are, but they're not ultimate. Your cultural identity markers, your particular ways of doing things, they're interesting, very fascinating, but not ultimate. What matters to you and to all of us most is a gift to you, to others, to the whole world. The deepest truth in life is the truth of a generous love that meets you right where you are, that enters the messiness of your life, we call it sin, and embraces you with unconditional acceptance. By grace, you have been saved through faith. It is not a matter of your own doing. And by the way, it is by grace through faith that others have been saved too. It is not a matter of their own doing. Therefore, the silly games that we too often play, ranking ourselves over against others, feeling better about ourselves because we belong to the right group, and insisting that others do things the way we do them, are unveiled as the silliness that they are. Paul puts it this way. Then what becomes of boasting? It is excluded. Not on the basis of what you or I do, or not on the basis of our labels, but rather on the basis of faith. Which, by the way, faith is not belief. Faith is simple trust that what matters most in life is not our performance or our pedigree, but the gift and grace of God. Amen.